My phone vibrated again. The Provincial Emergency Management Department and the Provincial Meteorological Bureau remind you. On the night of the 23rd, Typhoon Pomegranate will make a direct hit on our province, with winds reaching force 15 to 18. I glanced at it and deleted it. This was already the 13th warning text I'd received today. Some were from the Provincial Meteorological Bureau, some from the Flood Control Office, some from the Emergency Management Department, and there was even one from an app one don't even remember signing up for. Looks like this once-in-30-years super typhoon is no joke. School was suspended for 5 straight days, and most companies in Deep Blue City had also shut down. I tilted my head and looked out the window. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the blue looked unreal. It didn't look at all like a typhoon was coming. Ding dong. My mom, Liang Ying, sent a message. The typhoon will start tonight, and there may be a water outage. Go to the mall with your sister and buy some supplies. Turn on the water storage tank when you get home, and fill the water vat too. I replied with an okay, yawned, and stood up to stretch. There were still more than 10 minutes before self-study ended, and I'd already dozed off several times. Lu Xiaopeng next to me waved at me. Brother Liang, Brother Liang. What? He leaned over mysteriously. I've got something important to tell you. Lu Xiaopeng got obsessed with prepping last year and carries a little waist pouch called an EDC every day, with an especially sharp military-grade knife stuffed inside. Once on the subway, he was almost detained as a dangerous person. If it weren't for his student ID and a few classmates testifying for him, he would have definitely ended up in detention. I met a Chinese guy on a survival forum overseas. He works at the Meteorological Bureau, high up. He said the weather this year has been especially strange. After his team monitored some unusual phenomena and reported them, not only were they not allowed to continue monitoring, they were reassigned instead. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't they offend someone? Definitely not. Brother Liang, I'm only telling you this because you're my best friend. You'd better stock up on some supplies and medicine just in case. Stop right there. I frowned. Are you actually hoping a disaster happens? He froze for a moment, then actually nodded. A little, I guess. That way I'd finally have a chance to put my skills to use. I closed my eyes and struck the pose of an old monk in meditation. That's not what I meant. He got anxious. This time it's really a little strange. Brother Liang, you need to prepare in advance. The bell rang for the end of class. A startling cheer erupted from the entire teaching building. I barely even thought before grabbing my backpack in one motion and rushing out. Brother Liang, don't forget what I said. I didn't look back once. The streets were packed to the brim. With all the schools and companies going on break at once, I hadn't even ridden a few hundred meters before I was forced to get off and push my bike. The sidewalk was densely packed with people, shared bikes were crammed in everywhere, and the motor vehicle lanes were jammed solid too. Even the traffic police couldn't keep up with directing things. Horns blared one after another, making people irritable. I didn't notice the people being evacuated from the subway entrance by the roadside, nor did I notice the commercial airliner in the sky trailing a long white streak. 11:58, at the entrance to the mall. Why are you so slow? My sister Liang Wenjing was standing there waiting for me. There were too many people on the road. After parking my bike, I walked into the mall with her. The moment we stepped through the entrance, a cable overhead crackled and spat out a string of sparks. Is this mall too old, or what? Someone beside us muttered. There's not much to say about the shopping process. Whatever Liang Wenjing decided to buy, I just played the tool guy and pushed the cart. After grabbing a pile of things, she asked again, should we get bottled water? No need. It's too hard to carry. Mom's coming to pick us up, and if the water and power go out, we won't have anything to drink. Fine. I picked up a case of bottled water and tossed it into the cart, then grabbed a case of milk too. The line at the checkout was absurdly long, so we could only wait obediently. The mall's background music was playing an old song, and from the cheap speakers there came the occasional buzzing electrical static. Then the lyrics started glitching, skipping, and repeating. Snap! Another shower of sparks flashed overhead. Must be a power grid fault. Someone looked up. I heard line 5 on the subway suddenly came to an emergency stop. A lot of people got hurt. Huh, when did that happen? There were ambulance sirens all along the way just now. I took out my phone and checked the class group chat. Sure enough, people were talking about it. Then I scrolled through moments, and someone had actually captured footage of the plane crashing, with a caption saying a lot of people had died. Why is the internet so laggy? The news hasn't even pushed anything out. It must be fake, right? In my heart, I was more inclined toward that last explanation. Online rumors spread far too easily. Before the authorities release anything, it's best not to jump to conclusions. But my phone was still vibrating nonstop. Lu Xiaopeng's private messages poured in like machine gun fire. Something happened. Something really happened. Line 5 had an emergency stop, derailed, and lots of people died. Deep Blue Airlines flight ZH9469 crashed, and the casualties are currently unknown. There's something else I didn't tell you before. I got an amateur radio license last year and met some hobbyists. They told me that starting from this February, all amateur radio bands were banned. The authorities have their reasons, but taken together, these things are absolutely not normal. If you believe me, at the very least stock up on useful supplies. Food, stomach medicine, cold medicine, antibiotics, vitamins, and water. I replied, "What's amateur radio?" He didn't reply. Could this guy's words be trusted? Ever since he got obsessed with prepping, he's been acting mysterious every day, spending all his allowance on all kinds of survival supplies, and mooching food and drinks off us for a long time. But one thing he said was right. Anything edible or drinkable you buy will get used eventually, so it won't go to waste. Besides, the atmosphere today really was a little strange. Liang Wenjing and I went back and picked up quite a lot of canned food with a long shelf life. Compressed biscuits, bagged bread, 2 full shopping carts, and it cost more than 800. While waiting for the elevator, Liang Wenjing hunched her neck. Did we buy too much? Now you're getting scared again? She pouted. The elevator arrived. I pushed the 2 carts inside, instantly taking up most of the space. The moment the doors closed, the ad light inside flickered several times. I suddenly thought of the sparking cables in the mall and the microwave explosion. I shouldn't have taken the elevator, but it was too late. From the first floor to B1 took no more than 10 seconds. I frowned. It wasn't exactly worry, but there was definitely tension. What if we got trapped inside? It wasn't as if it would fall. The deepest level here was only B2. But even so, being stuck would be enough to torment us for an hour. Fortunately, the elevator reached B1 smoothly. The ad light didn't flicker again, as if what had just happened was only my imagination. We didn't see my mom's car in the underground parking garage. Liang Wenjing called her, and the voice on the other end kept cutting in and out. Fortunately, headlights appeared around the corner. Liang Ying rolled down the window. She had just gotten off work and was still wearing her black suit uniform. Why did you buy so much stuff? Liang Wenjing stuck out her tongue. We accidentally bought too much. There are a lot of cars behind us. Let's go. She motioned for Liang Wenjing to get in. My bike was still up there, so I didn't go with them. There were only 2 ways back into the mall, the elevator or the fire exit. I chose the fire exit without hesitation. The moment I came out of the fire exit, I heard a security guard shouting into his walkie-talkie. Elevator malfunction, people trapped inside. Sure enough, something had gone wrong. Outside was still chaos. Horns, whistles, and the wail of ambulance sirens were all mixed together like a pot of overcooked porridge. I looked up at the sky and froze for a moment. The white streak left by that plane still hadn't dissipated, like a knife splitting the sky in 2. One half was a clear blue, the other half a blood-red sunset. The scene was too bizarre, as if someone had forcibly peeled the entire city out of reality. I rode my bike to the subway entrance, and from the evacuated passengers, I learned what I wanted to confirm. Line 5 really had come to an emergency stop because of a power failure. But he said the casualties weren't serious. It was just that the sudden braking caused a pregnant woman to be thrown from her seat, resulting in severe bleeding. Everyone else only had bumps and scrapes. I let out a sigh of relief. Sure enough, I'd overthought it. So what if something really had happened on the subway? It would become tomorrow's headline, be mourned by netizens across the country for a round, and then be drowned out by the next entertainment trending topic. Aside from making people sigh over life's unpredictability, nothing would change. The world would keep turning as usual. Hurry home. There's a big typhoon tonight. Don't linger outside. A staff member urged me. Did the subway stop operating because of a power grid fault? Yes, probably caused by the typhoon. On the way home, I kept scrolling through my phone. I searched Weibo over and only found a few pictures of the plane trailing a white streak. It did look a little low, but it was also possible someone had deliberately manipulated the focal length. Some so-called big influencers had already started debunking the rumors. The authorities still hadn't responded, but no response was the best response. I chose to trust the authorities. My home is in the semi-suburban area, Lane 27. All self-built houses with limited property rights. At the entrance to the lane are 2 7-story rental buildings. Go another 200 meters in and there's a small pond. Next to it, the village chief's 2-story Western-style house. And right after that is my family's 3-story house. On the first floor is Weiwei convenience store, run by my childhood friend Wei Yochi's family. Wei Yochi still wasn't back. His mom, Aunt Xiaoping, was sitting at the store entrance scrolling short videos without even looking up. He went with his dad to restock. I pulled open the big iron gate beside the convenience store and went up to the 3rd floor. My mom had already sorted out everything we bought. On the kitchen counter were stacks of canned food, compressed biscuits, and instant noodles, piled up like a small mountain. My mom looked at the pile with a bit of a headache. What on earth were you thinking? Just as I was wondering how to explain, my phone buzzed. It was Liu Xiaoping. More than a dozen ambulances drove past one after another. How could it be that only a pregnant woman was injured? See for yourself, someone else sent this to me. Below was a disappearing photo that could only be viewed for 5 seconds. I opened it and saw blood, internal organs, severed limbs. I carefully examined every detail in the image. The scene was horrific, but for me it wasn't to the point of being impossible to look at. I stared at it, looking for what I wanted to confirm, the sign for the subway station. I was far too familiar with the subway stations around here. At a glance I could tell this photo was real, not some fake image pulled from the internet to spread rumors. The disappearing photo vanished, and the screen returned to the chat interface. His last message was, "Have you stocked up on food and medicine?" I held my phone and didn't reply. Outside, the sky had gone completely dark. Half blood red, half deep blue. It looked like it really was true. That staff member probably didn't know. Liang Shuyu thought back to the expression on the face of the staff member at the subway entrance just now. Although the other person had been dutifully evacuating the crowd, he had still caught a trace of impatient anxiety. If the man had really known that a major casualty incident had happened in the subway, he couldn't possibly have looked like that. Exactly. Something happened in the subway. And the plane too. I think something big is about to happen. Why aren't you going to stock up on more things? Bought some canned food and compressed biscuits to keep in storage, Liang Shuyu replied. Hum. Compressed biscuits are good. What about medicine? We have regular medicine at home. No way. Liu Xiaoping sounded a little agitated. Do you know why amateur radio was banned? Maybe it's because they don't want people around the world exchanging information through it. And the subway malfunction still hasn't made the news. I suspect someone is deliberately suppressing it. Anyway, there are a lot of strange things about this whole matter. Brother Liang, just listen to me. Even the traffic outside my window feels unsettling right now. I have a feeling something major is about to happen. Your hunches have never been right. I remember one exam when Liu Xiaoping said he had a feeling he'd done really well, but when the results came out he had dropped a full 30 places from last time. I'm serious, Brother Liang. People in our circle have survivalists analyzing this. After last year's massive blackout in Europe, their economy regressed by a full 30 years or more. If our policies this year hadn't been good, maybe all of Asia would have been dragged into a financial crisis. You know what those bastards in Europe are like? Maybe to shift internal tensions they'll start a war, and then our coastal cities will be the first to suffer. And you know Zika's prophecy, right? 6 of his 9 prophecies have already come true. The next prophecy is this year. A lot of people will die. Liang Shuyu had indeed heard of this person Zika. Online, he was talked about like some kind of legend, claiming he had traveled through time from the future world. More precisely, from 2085. He first appeared in 2018, posting on Forum a thread titled, "I Come From Hell." In the first post, he said he came from hell, 2085. He had come here not to save humanity in the past, nor because future humans had invented a time machine. Rather, he had undergone some kind of mutation. His consciousness could overlap with time to a certain extent and converse with people from the past. Then he gave his first prophecy, dated 2020. The content was, in this year, nature created a weapon that killed many people indiscriminately. Hell began with this new era. Next, I will slowly reveal to you the lives you will have in the future. After posting this thread, he never appeared again, because there were simply too many prophecy threads like this from people claiming to be from the future. Not to mention this sort of cringy, incoherent thing. Naturally, this thread did not attract much attention. Everyone knows what happened afterward. He appeared for the second time in 2022. This time he left behind 8 prophecies, making 9 in total, including the one from 2018. The remaining 8 prophecies included earthquakes, natural disasters, and various major current events. The content and timing pointed to by each prophecy were all very vague, making them absolutely impossible to guess before the events happened. But after the events occurred, they gave people a sudden feeling of realization. His 6th prophecy was that this year would be the true beginning of hell, and many people would freeze to death in a short period of time. But that was nothing, because it was only the beginning. His 7th prophecy was that this year you would step into the real hell. Look forward to it. It's no big deal. The weak would be eliminated first, and only the strong could survive. But even those who survived shouldn't be too smug. His 8th prophecy was that this year, women in particular would have a terrible time. Of course, the kind of terrible I mean is not what you think. His ninth prophecy was that this year I was born, and compared with you, I am very ugly. But it doesn't matter. I survived. None of his 9 prophecies pointed to an exact time, nor did they point to specific events. Looking at his prophecies solely from the perspective of before anything happened, they were completely baffling. In 2031, Europe suffered a massive blackout because of a solar storm. It was in the spring. People without heating froze to death and starved to death one after another within a month. The recorded death toll was more than 3,000. It was said that the unrecorded number was close to 10,000. Most people online believed the 6th prophecy referred to the Great European Blackout. But Liang Shuyu thought this was complete nonsense. Just because it mentioned the words freeze to death, without even a time frame. They said his prophecy had succeeded. Isn't that ridiculous? Besides, Zika's original thread from back then had long since been deleted, and the 9 major prophecies circulating online had several different versions. Who knows whether someone later deliberately altered them and drags them out every year to hype them up? Is something this incoherent really worth being treated like a Bible to be devoutly read and trusted? His prophecies never gave a specific time, right? They're not worth trusting. Liang Shuyu replied to Liu Xiaobang. Damn, there's another car accident down there. I know, but the timing of his prophecies is uncertain. Sometimes the intervals are very short, sometimes very long. And now an 18-level typhoon has suddenly arrived. Something has to be going on. Even if it's not war, maybe it's a natural disaster. Some kind of super tornado or something. So this is completely personal speculation? Go wash up and sleep. Liang Shuyu suddenly felt ridiculous for actually listening to Liu Xiaobang and stocking up on compressed biscuits. He was seriously idiot number 1. Come on, brother Liang, don't. I really do have a very strong premonition. Please. I'm not just making wild guesses. I admit that sometimes I'm a bit unserious, but this time I mean it. Something really is going to happen. My premonition this time is very strong. And also, I haven't been able to get over the firewall all day today, which is really strange too. Please, just believe me this once, okay? You don't even need to buy anything else. Just go buy a little medicine. What if something does happen? Old Liang, just trust me this once. I know you definitely think I'm being unreasonable and acting like a lunatic. But if you weren't my best brother, why the hell would I spend so much effort explaining all this to you? I'm begging you. Just go buy some cold medicine and antibiotics to keep at home. If it turns out in the end that you really don't need them, I'll do your cleaning duty for a month, okay? Lying sprawled on the sofa, Liang Shuyu had nothing to say. 2 months. Fine, 2 months then. Also withdraw some cash. Liang Shuyu was practically forced out the door. Although he was only 17 this year, because of his single-parent family, he was someone very mature and rational for his age. Of course, he also had a young and naive side. For example, being frightened by the subway accident in the mall and ending up buying a huge pile of things. But he calmed down quickly too, and analyzed that even if it was a subway accident, there really was no need to hoard supplies. It's good for people to be cautious, but being too jumpy just makes you look brain dead. Liu Xiaopan's worry wasn't entirely unnecessary. Liang Shuyu just felt it was a bit exaggerated. He could prepare in advance and make some necessary preparations. But there was no need to act like an idiot, hearing a little rumor and reacting as if the sky were falling, then running to the mall or pharmacy to stock up in a frenzy. Doing that made him feel like a brainwashed fool. Still, the matter of withdrawing cash did remind him of something important. In the age of electronic money, if this area were to lose power for a while, having some cash on hand would be very necessary. At the very least, it could keep him from ending up poor just because his phone ran out of battery. So he readily asked Liang Ying for a bank card. Liang Ying said, "It's good to withdraw some cash too. Also, your Auntie Lee suddenly has something to do and asked for half a month off. Since you're going out anyway, help me bring back the spare key from her place." "Okay, I'm heading out." "Sis, do you want to come too?" "No, I'm riding. Charge the power bank fully. There'll be a power outage tonight." "Oh, I almost forgot." After leaving home, he first went to the bank ATM to withdraw money. There were a lot of people withdrawing cash, so he had to wait in line for a long time before he got his turn. The daily maximum limit at the ATM was only 20,000 yuan, so Liang Shuyu withdrew 20,000. After taking out the money, he went to the nearest large pharmacy to buy medicine. The streets were still chaotic because Deep Blue City was on holiday. The sky was gradually getting dark. The white streak that had split the sky in two earlier had already disappeared, and there was no sign of the evening glow either, leaving only a plain, deep blue sky. Everything looked normal, aside from the traffic being a bit chaotic. 1549. There weren't many people in the pharmacy, and since Liang Shuyu was already here, he wasn't really going to buy only cold medicine and antibiotics as Liu Xiaopang had said. That was just how he was, a bit sharp-tongued but soft-hearted. Although he felt Lu Xiaopeng was making a fuss over nothing, the guy had said that much already. He wasn't short of money anyway, so making a friend happy wasn't a bad thing. Cold medicine, stomach medicine, antibiotics, vitamins, just pick some as you see fit. Liang Shuyu said this while messaging Lu Xiaopeng. Brother Liang, sure enough, you're the one who trusts me most. These really are medicines you should keep on hand, but it's still not enough. I'll take a picture of my list for you to see. Give me a break, will you? Taking advantage and still acting coy? The internet's a bit slow, wait a sec. The pharmacy auntie recommended a whole pile according to Liang Shuyu's request and took them to the glass counter. Looking at the prices stuck on the medicine boxes, Liang Shuyu felt he was probably going to bleed money today. Buy health, how much is one bottle of this? Buy 3 of this one and get 1 free. Liang Shuyu smiled. No need. Do you have Lixing? Give me 1 box of Lixing vitamin C. The pharmacy auntie's expression clearly flickered a few times before she reluctantly took out Lixing brand vitamins from a corner. Wasn't this a joke? Buy health vitamins cost nearly 100 yuan a bottle. Lixing vitamins cost just a few yuan a box. He had bought vitamins for Liang Wenjing so many times that he still had this bit of common sense. Damn, the internet is too slow. I'll just tell you directly. You should also buy some cotton swabs, masks, iodophor, bandages. None of these are expensive, so don't skimp. Besides amoxicillin, antibiotics also include at asterisk. At you and Liang Shuyu sent a question mark over. What do you mean? Why did it turn into gibberish halfway through? Get some more iodophor, cotton swabs, masks, and bandages too. Get several types of antibiotics. The pharmacy auntie gave Liang Shuyu, who was tapping on his phone screen, a strange look. What's this? The end of the world. One after another, all coming to stockpile medicine. Liang Shuyu suddenly raised his head. One after another? A lot of people are stockpiling medicine. Not that many, but I've run into a few like you anyway. Liang Shuyu smiled. Are pharmacy sales tactics this up to date now? The pharmacy auntie clearly didn't understand what Liang Shuyu was talking about. At this moment, a message from Lu Xiaopeng came through. Alright, that's all. Just buy as you see fit. But aside from that message that had turned into gibberish halfway through, Liang Shuyu hadn't received any other messages at all. Is your phone signal bad? Or is there something wrong with my phone? I didn't get the messages. Your earlier message was garbled. After talking with Lu Xiaopeng, Liang Shuyu looked up again and said to the pharmacy auntie, give me 1 set of whatever those people were buying too. The pharmacy auntie's eyes lit up. Alrighty. Liang Shuyu suddenly felt like he'd been tricked again. Could this really be some new sales tactic? 1,308. Forget the extra 8 yuan, just make it a round number. Thanks. Liang Shuyu paid with a bitter smile, using his own stash of private money. Welcome next time. The pharmacy auntie didn't forget to twist the knife in his knee. The 2 huge lumps of medicine in his hands suddenly felt even heavier. And later he still had to go to Liang Ying's studio to get the spare key from Auntie Li. It was easy to imagine what kind of strange look she'd give him when she saw the 2 lumps of medicine in his hands. To make you happy, I'm almost out of savings, so how are you going to repay me? But Lu Xiaopeng still hadn't replied to him. And the 5G network had suddenly become so slow that it was just buffering. Could a power grid failure also affect 5G base stations? Maybe. Thinking this, Liang Shuyu slowly made his way downstairs to Liang Ying's studio, but as soon as he arrived at Xiaofeng building, his headache started up again. His mother dear's office was on the 7th floor. Now that the power grid in this area had problems, there was no way he wanted to take the elevator. Did that mean he had to carry these 2 big bags up the stairs to the 7th floor? 1704. By the time he reached the 7th floor, Liang Shuyu's back was already covered in a layer of sweat. This floor was jointly rented by several studios, and right outside the fire exit was the neighboring Bixing Huayuan. The staff inside, who were packing up and getting ready to leave work, saw the sweating Liang Shuyu. Little Liang, here to hang out again? Did this look like he was here to hang out? Liang Shuyu casually greeted them. Then after walking out of Bixing Huayuan, first put the 2 bags of medicine outside Liang Ying's studio door and pushed open the glass door. Most of the lights inside were off, making it dim and gloomy. Only Auntie Li's computer screen was still on. Little Liang, you're here? Wait a moment, and I'll get you the key. After a while, when he got the key, Auntie Li sat back down again. Annie still has a bit of work to finish before leaving, so you should hurry back. It's going to rain heavily later. Okay. After taking the key, Liang Shuyu didn't rest much before leaving the office. But when he walked out, he discovered that a rolling shutter door was blocking his way. Yet the fire exit had been shut inside the rolling shutter door. Bang, bang, bang. Hey, anyone there? Damn, there's no one inside anymore. Liang Shuyu turned around, just as the number light on the elevator indicated it had arrived at the first floor. It was probably during the short time he had gone in just now that those people had happened to close the rolling shutter door and take the elevator down. How could the fire exit be inside the rolling shutter door? This simply didn't meet fire safety regulations. Did that mean he could only take the elevator? Damn, what a bunch of lunatics. Liang Shuyu couldn't help cursing inwardly. If he'd known he'd have to take the elevator sooner or later, why had he worked so hard to climb the stairs up here? Damn it. With a headache, Liang Shuyu pressed the elevator button and lit it up. This was his only option. Those people had just gone down without incident. And he'd taken this elevator many times before without it ever malfunctioning. He shouldn't be that unlucky. With a ding, the elevator arrived smoothly at the 7th floor. Liang Shuyu walked in and glanced at the elevator buttons. Including the basement, this building had 10 floors in total, and judging by the wear on the elevator buttons, this elevator was much newer than the one in the mall. And this was a sightseeing elevator, so riders could see the scenery on the street outside. If it malfunctioned, people on the street outside would also be able to see inside. After analyzing all this, Liang Shuyu finally pressed the button for the first floor. The elevator doors slowly closed. Though it might have seemed a bit overly cautious, Liang Shuyu didn't think there was anything wrong with being more alert. It's always right to be careful. After all, he didn't want to get trapped in an elevator. The elevator stopped at the 5th floor, and a young woman with 2 children got in. So far, everything had gone smoothly. The elevator slowly closed again. Baby, don't press randomly. One of the children mischievously wanted to fiddle with the elevator buttons, but luckily the woman stopped him in time. The elevator stopped again. Baby, don't be naughty. The elevator door is about to open. She had just stopped the child who wanted to press the buttons when the other child leaned against the door and started picking at the gap in the elevator doors. By the time she pulled both children back, the elevator still hadn't opened. Liang Shuyu looked up at the number light in confusion, only to see that it was still showing the 5th floor. Then where are we stopped now? Liang Shuyu hurriedly looked outside, and judging from the building structure through the glass, they seemed to be stopped between the 4th and 5th floors. Damn, was he really this unlucky? What you fear is exactly what comes. Although startled, he wasn't panicked yet. Elevators all have safety devices. Unless those safety devices are damaged, this elevator would only remain stopped here. Liang Shuyu calmly walked forward and pressed the emergency button inside the car. Before long, a man's voice came from the other side, and Liang Shuyu told him about the situation here. Yes, the elevator suddenly stopped. Besides me, there's also a mother and 2 children in the car. The elevator is stopped between the 4th and 5th floors. Okay, don't worry, stay calm. The electrician just left. I'll hurry and call him back. The person on the other end was probably not the usual staff on duty and seemed even more flustered than Liang Shuyu. Liang Shuyu even heard the sound of a chair being knocked over through the receiver. But for now, all he needed to do was wait for rescue in the elevator. Mommy, why isn't the elevator moving? The mother was fairly calm, though the tension in her brow was unavoidable. Don't be afraid, baby. In a little while, police officers will come get us. Look at the cars outside. Aren't there so many? Wow, there really are so many cars. The 2 children were innocent and adorable. Liang Shuyu took out his phone, preparing to call Liang Ying and explain the situation so she wouldn't worry. But he found that there wasn't even the slightest signal. Damn it. When it rains, it pours. There wasn't even 2G signal. Speechless, Liang Shuyu rubbed the center of his brow, casually set the 2 bags of medicine on the floor, and sat down cross-legged. Just wait. There was no way they were getting out in less than an hour. Was he really that unlucky today? Maybe not, considering the elevator still hadn't fallen. About half an hour later, a voice came from the emergency button. Stay calm. Don't be afraid. Everyone got off work today, and I only just managed to reach someone. They're on their way over now. If any of you feel unwell, you can contact me. The young woman said. How do you people do your job? Shouldn't someone be on duty at a time like this? The person said, Ma'am, aren't I on duty right now? It's just that I'm new here, and I'm not familiar with this area. And today's situation is very unusual. The electrician responsible for duty had something happen at home and took emergency leave. But don't worry, I contacted another electrician to come over. You'll be rescued soon. The 2 children began to get scared, and the young woman's mood also worsened. But in the end, she said nothing more, and like Liang Shuyu, sat down and waited slowly. Outside, the sky darkened quickly, and it gradually began to drizzle. The hazy streetlights glowed in the rain, and traffic police directed traffic under them despite the downpour. There were fewer pedestrians on the street, and the wind gradually grew stronger. Even without hearing the sounds outside, one could tell how strong the wind was from the violently swaying trees and the umbrellas trembling wildly in the gusts. A typhoon was coming. 1827. The wind and rain had come so abruptly that they gave passers-by no time to prepare. The sky had gone completely dark. Even the police directing traffic had to cling to road signs to keep from being blown away. While whistling, spinning garbage bags of all colors drifted about like ghosts from the underworld. A large sheet of metal that had flown in from who knew where suddenly slammed into the top of the sightseeing elevator. Above Liang Shuyu's head, around the 6th floor. But it was only sheet metal. No match in the end for specially made domestic glass. After smashing against the outside of the sightseeing elevator twice, the big metal sheet lost its support and fell away. Although the elevator was completely fine, the two children were scared into loud wailing. "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid." The young woman comforted them, but it had no effect at all. The children's crying was like a death knell, making the woman extremely irritable. Impatiently, she clenched her fist and slammed the emergency button twice, shouting, "Where are you people? Why aren't you down here yet? How long exactly are you going to keep us trapped?" But her questioning was like a stone dropped into an abyss. After a plop, there was no more sound and no response at all. The young woman began to panic. She turned to look at Liang Shuyu for 2 seconds. "Do you have any signal on your phone?" she asked. Liang Shuyu took it out and glanced at it. Still none. The woman was on the verge of collapse and began frantically pressing the bell. "Help. Is anyone there? There are 2 children here. Someone come quickly." But there was still no response at all. Sensing their mother's panic, the 2 children began crying and screaming even more heart-rendingly. Liang Shuyu's head felt like it was splitting from the noise. "Shut up. The air in here is limited. Save your strength." After being yelled at, the woman became somewhat frightened and took half a step back, holding the children. Almost in a tearful voice, she said, "I saw on TV that they can get out through the top of the elevator. Should we try it?" Liang Shuyu closed his eyes to rest and ignored her. Getting out through the top of the elevator, that was something done on TV. He wasn't crazy yet. He didn't know how much time had passed when, through his closed eyelids, he sensed a blinding light. Could the electrician have arrived? Liang Shuyu opened his eyes and at the same time heard the woman's astonished voice. "What is that? Why is the sky so bright?" "The sky? Not flashlight beams." Liang Shuyu turned his head to look outside the sightseeing elevator. In the pitch-black rainy night, the sky had unfurled with bizarre, shifting green light of overwhelming visual impact. These sci-fi colors were as beautiful as a movie scene, with green, purple, and red alternating and layering as they changed. They dyed the earth and buildings in a vast, eerie, ghostly green. Under these hallucinatory colors, the young woman's face looked deathly pale. Her gaze was dazed, and her body seemed to be coursed through by wave after wave of electric current, her soul trembling in shock at this dazzling yet mysterious light. The clear pupils of the 2 children reflected their magnificent, immense forms. Under its illumination, this city looked as if it had been abducted by aliens, while that fantastical sci-fi glow had become some mysterious barrier separating the city from the rest of the world, like a dome that had appeared out of nowhere, covering the city from above. Looking at them, Liang Shuyu suddenly recalled the news he had seen last year. A beautiful dome of shifting red and green appeared in the sky, as if dyed by ribbons. Powerful auroral currents can interrupt or even destroy modern power grids and accelerate corrosion in oil and natural gas pipelines. In 2031, the widespread blackout in Europe directly led to the collapse of the northern power grid and spacecraft anomalies, as well as anomalies in high-frequency radio communication and the GPS satellite navigation system. It directly disrupted transportation, communications, banking, financial systems, and government services. According to incomplete statistics, the economic losses caused by that widespread blackout in Europe had already reached hundreds of billions of US dollars. This large-scale super geomagnetic storm damaged several thousand transformers and caused irreparable harm to power networks, electronic devices, and all kinds of electronic hardware. At the time, mobile phones had practically become scrap metal. This disaster directly caused the deaths of 3,500 innocent people, most of whom died of starvation or freezing. Aurora. How could there be an aurora here? During last year's massive European blackout, auroras were only observed on mountains at an altitude of 3,000 meters. How could a coastal city like Deep Blue City see an aurora? The stream of high-energy charged particles released by a solar storm can trigger a geomagnetic storm, and a geomagnetic storm can damage or even destroy all electrical equipment. Could this time Deep Blue City's power grid failure have been caused by a solar storm? Not a typhoon. Liang Shuyu took out his phone. The screen could still turn on, but the signal indicator now showed a complete cross. How could this happen? How could there be an aurora here? A solar storm is bound to cause power grid failures. Could it be that the entire deep blue city is about to fall into a long-term power outage? During last year's massive European blackout, the European authorities worked busily for more than a month before restoring the grid, and the economic losses it caused would take 30 years to recover from. So what about this time? How long would it take to recover? And how great would the economic losses be? Beneath the dazzling aurora, many drivers stuck on the highway opened their car doors and stepped outside to admire this magnificent spectacle, one that this eastern nation might not see again for hundreds of millions of years. But what Liang Shuyu noticed was that after car stalled, they could never be started again. Because modern sedans, except for some diesel vehicles, require electricity to start. To repair this elevator, electricity would probably be needed too. Liang Shuyu slowly tilted his head back and looked up at the elevator's ceiling. He had heard that during last year's massive European blackout, the greatest number of deaths had been from freezing. Europe is far from the equator and has a cold climate. A spring without heating was simply the deadliest blow for them. But during that month, besides those who froze to death, many poor people also starved to death. Of course, that wasn't the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was those trapped in elevators, offices, and all kinds of places. Because of the chaos outside, they did not receive timely rescue, and only after power was restored more than a month later did people open the sealed-off restricted areas and discover that the corpses of those trapped to death had already begun to stink. Would he also be trapped here? No. Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. His mother knew he had come to the office. If he didn't go back for a long time, she would definitely come looking for him. And the electrician outside knew that 4 people were trapped here and had already contacted rescuers to come. It was only a matter of time before they were rescued. There was no way they would be trapped here for half a month or a month. In the worst-case scenario, if no one came to rescue him, he could still pry open the elevator's ceiling and escape through it. Those cases in Europe where people were trapped in elevators and couldn't get out were because the elevators were rather special. Besides, he was riding a sightseeing elevator. As long as someone outside sees that they're trapped here, rescue will definitely come. Right? His situation isn't that bad. Don't worry too much. He'll definitely find a way out and won't be trapped here forever. Liang Shuyu took several deep breaths and checked his analysis again. First of all, his mother would definitely come looking for him. That was beyond doubt. So he really didn't need to worry too much. After thinking it through, the tension and fear caused by the aurora at the beginning had completely dissipated, and his vision cleared. Liang Shuyu examined the elevator again. It was still steadily stopped between the 4th and 5th floors. There was an obvious air vent in the ceiling. If he wanted to escape from there, it wouldn't be difficult, at least not for him. Right now, this woman and the 2 children still didn't understand what was happening. The 2 children were even shouting excitedly. Their innocent childish words sounded so pure, and this ignorant young woman was actually happily admiring those shifting fantasy-like colors as well. Liang Shuyu was in no mood to admire those deadly lights. He was calculating how to leave this elevator more safely, and after a brief inspection, he discovered that the fastest and safest method should be to pry open the elevator door directly. The reason he had considered the ceiling first was entirely because he had been too nervous at the time and had been influenced by that woman's words. This elevator door shouldn't be hard to pry open. Liang Shuyu stepped forward and tried it. Using just a little force, he pried the elevator door open into a small gap. It really wasn't difficult. This route was feasible. While Liang Shuyu was straining with all his might to pry the door open, the 2 children were happily watching the aurora. One of them saw him prying at the door, stuck out his lips, pointed at him, and tattled. "Mom, look, he's being naughty." The young woman was taking pictures with her phone. When she saw what Liang Shuyu was doing, she frowned and said, "Wouldn't this be too dangerous? What if the elevator falls?" Liang Shuyu ignored her. The woman started to get a little scared again. Although the scene in the sky was extremely beautiful, she also knew that such a strange phenomenon was indeed a little creepy, but she had preconceively assumed it was a weather anomaly caused by the typhoon, so she hadn't paid much attention to it. But Liang Shuyu's actions concerned her a lot. "How about we just wait for the electrician? This is too dangerous. I saw on the news that prying open elevator doors can easily cause elevator accidents." "Mom, I'm scared." The 2 children hugged the woman's legs, fear showing in their eyes. "Boo-hoo, Mom, I'm scared." "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Look, isn't the sky beautiful?" The 2 children started crying. The woman couldn't soothe them, and soon it turned into loud wailing. Once the children cried, The situation in the elevator became utterly miserable. It was already stuffy and short of oxygen in here, and the children were crying their hearts out. And no matter how she tried, she couldn't calm them down. Liang Shuyu was made irritable by the commotion, and he turned his head and shouted at the child, "Stop it! Shut up!" Perhaps his expression was fierce enough. The child was finally so frightened that he didn't dare cry anymore. "I'm fine." Finally escaping from the elevator, Liang Shuyu was covered in sweat, and when the cold wind outside hit him, his whole body shivered. Liang Ying hugged him with a pale face. Liang Shuyu patted Liang Ying on the shoulder with his backhand. "I'm really fine. A typhoon's coming. Let's hurry home." Liang Ying forced herself not to let the tears fall. She had waited at home for a long time, but Liang Shuyu still hadn't returned. And then strange flashes of light suddenly appeared in the sky. It was only after hearing the neighbors downstairs talking that she learned it was actually an aurora. An aurora caused by a strong electromagnetic current. And then the power at home suddenly went out, which made her think of last year's massive blackout in Europe. She had always been calm and prided herself on being a strong woman, yet she was so frightened she nearly cried. And when she thought that going to the studio would definitely require taking the elevator, could Liang Shuyu be trapped in one? So she hurried out of the house, but the wind outside had already picked up strongly, and she didn't feel comfortable bringing Liang Wenjing along. Thank goodness, thank goodness. Liang Ying looked at Liang Shuyu, completely unharmed, and her neat short hair and silver-rimmed glasses seemed to carry a trace of vulnerability. Liang Shuyu took her hand, passing courage to her. "It's okay. It's good that you're okay. Hey, you should hurry back. If it's any later, the rain will get heavier. No idea what's going on with this sky. It's strangely beautiful. This should also be a once-in-a-century natural phenomenon, right?" said the electrician who rescued them. Liang Ying said, "This is an aurora." Huh. The electrician was obviously startled. This is an aurora? Maybe he didn't recognize it when described as shifting green and red lights. But when it came to auroras, he would think of last year's large-scale blackout in Europe caused by a solar storm. Something practically everyone knew about. Only then did the woman who had escaped realize that this was actually an aurora. Wouldn't that mean this city, like Europe during last year's blackout, was going to have continuous power outages for 1 or 2 months? Her face instantly turned pale. "This is way too beautiful. So this is an aurora. I need to hurry home too. At a time like this, who can still work a shift?" the electrician said as he quickly packed up his tools and left. Liang Shuyu and Liang Ying paid the woman no more attention. Liang Ying had brought a raincoat, and after putting it on Liang Shuyu, the two of them headed home against the wind. Because of the aurora's sudden arrival, most of the shops in the whole area had already lost power, and loud crackling noises and sparks were coming from utility poles both near and far. But fortunately, it was raining heavily, so the poles or transformers throwing off sparks were quickly doused. Although there were no lights on the road, under the illumination of the aurora, it was covered in a faint greenish-red glow, almost like daylight. As they passed a shop, Liang Shuyu said, "Let's buy some things before we go back." Naturally, Liang Ying had no objection. The two entered a nearby shop. It wasn't very big, but it was fairly well stocked. Considering that bottled water was too heavy, it would be better to buy it at Wei Youqi's home. But Wei Youqi's place was mainly a convenience store for daily necessities, and most of the goods were household items. Food made up only a small portion, so they could buy the food outside. And he had another concern. Last year's Europe solar storm blackout had lasted a month and a half. For such a long time, Wei Youqi's own family would definitely need food and supplies too. It was better to buy things outside. He and Liang Ying quickly filled 4 large shopping baskets. If he weren't worried they wouldn't be able to carry it all, he would have wanted to buy even more. The store's checkout machine wasn't working, so they had to use a calculator to settle the bill. However, the store's goods didn't have price tags on them. The prices were all on the shelves. The cashier couldn't remember the prices, so Liang Shuyu had to go to the shelves one by one to check them. They had bought so many things that this back and forth delayed other people, which caused some dissatisfaction. Why buy so much stuff? It's not the end of the world. A tall, skinny man had bought only a bottle of cola and a pack of cigarettes, and had already been waiting behind Liang Shuyu and the others for a long time. At this point, he couldn't help complaining. "Exactly. You're making it so tense. Anyone who didn't know better would think something huge had happened. It's a solar storm. There'll be a long power outage, so it's better to buy some things," said another man who had also bought a lot of items. "Damn, then can't you let us check out first? How long is this going to take?" said the tall, skinny man. "So what if it's a solar storm? The people who starved to death last year, was it because they couldn't buy things? It was because they couldn't afford them, right? What kind of society is this now? Why are some people so gullible? always following the crowd to hoard supplies at the slightest rumor, with the result that the people who really need them can't buy anything. Society is being ruined by people like this. The more this person spoke, the angrier he became. At first he was talking to the air, then he was speaking directly in Liang Shuyu's direction. During last year's solar storm, if those profiteers hadn't deliberately hoarded goods and driven up prices, would so many poor people have starved to death? And during that major flu outbreak, when so many people hoarded masks and made a fortune off the national disaster, why didn't they think that they too were born and raised by parents? After they die, won't they go to hell? The more he spoke, the more agitated and the harsher his words became. At first, a few people echoed him, but later his words became too unpleasant and no one paid him any attention anymore. Damn idiot. The man concluded at last. Liang Shuyu felt that the words idiot sounded a little familiar. Right. He was an idiot. So what if he was an idiot? Was that more important than his life? The aurora in the sky was dazzling, and the night seemed like day. 21-23. As soon as they entered alley 27, they heard someone gloatingly say, "Vacation. This solar storm came at just the right time, didn't it? Does that mean we can skip work for a whole month?" Ah, my game. There was a lot of discussion along the way as they arrived at Weiwei convenience store. Oh dear, what are we going to do? There are still so many popsicles in the freezer. It was Aunt Xiaoping's voice. Liang Shuyu and the others put their things in the hallway. Because the wind and rain were too strong, the rolling shutter door of Wei Youqi's home had already been pulled down. Only a small side door wide enough for one person was left open. Hearing movement outside, Aunt Xiaoping quickly stuck her head out. "Xiaoyu, you're back?" Sure enough, she saw Liang Shuyu and Liang Ying. Aunt Xiaoping smiled. "I told you he'd definitely be fine. Look how worried you were." Liang Ying returned a raincoat she had borrowed to her. "He got stuck in the elevator, but luckily he's fine." "Oh my." Aunt Xiaoping was startled. Inside, Fatty Wei and Wei Youqi also came over after hearing the commotion, and Wei Youqi even rushed out and gave Liang Shuyu a big bear hug. "Old Liang, you weren't scared stupid, were you?" Liang Shuyu rolled his eyes at him. From that tone, was he actually waiting for him to get scared stupid? Wei Youqi hung off him, laughing loudly. Although Liang Shuyu had been trapped in the elevator for a while, he really hadn't been frightened. Not long after he had decided to pry open the elevator door, the electrician arrived. Actually, the electrician had come much earlier. It was only delayed because the fire exit door on the 4th floor was locked, and they had to go find someone to open it. Every floor in Shopping Tower was rented out. Although the fire exit door keys were kept under unified management by the property management, each one was in the care of a designated person, and the people on the 4th floor had already gotten off work. They even had to get the consent of the 4th floor tenant to open the fire exit. In short, there were also some malfunctions with the elevator's emergency contact system at the time, and the electrician outside was frantic too. "It's good that you're okay. Annie, help me get 2 cases of mineral water," Liang Shuyu said. Aunt Xiaoping answered and happily told Fatty Wei to bring out 2 cases of mineral water. Fatty Wei also helped them carry their things upstairs. When Aunt Xiaoping saw that they had bought so much stuff, she muttered, "Why did you buy so much?" Liang Shuyu thought for a moment. Everyone knew about the solar storm, but Aunt Xiaoping's family were the sort with little sense of crisis, so he still felt it was necessary to remind them. This solar storm is going to cause at least 1 or 2 months of power outages. "Auntie, do you have enough supplies at home? Do you want to stock up a bit more?" Aunt Xiaoping waved her hand. "Our family runs a convenience store. You're worrying too much." That was true enough, but if possible, maybe they could set some things aside instead of selling them all, just to keep as backup. "Xiaoyu, this is where you don't understand. Times like this are exactly when we can make money. If I close up and stop selling, what will our family live on?" Liang Shuyu really had no good rebuttal to that, so he could only look at Wei Youqi. As Liang Shuyu's childhood friend and desk mate, Wei Youqi of course knew what Liang Shuyu was worried about. Very tactfully, he tugged at his mother's arm. "Doesn't the solar storm also seem like it could paralyze transportation? Then we definitely won't be able to restock." "Mom, I think old Liang does have a point. The supply market isn't far away anyway." Wei Youqi was left speechless too. Their family's source of goods was the wholesale market less than 3 kilometers behind this alley. It really didn't seem that far, huh? That seems true too. We could even just ride bicycles there to restock, Wei Youqi said after thinking about it. Only then did Liang Shuyu learn that the wholesale market was so close. It seemed he might have worried too much on Wei Youqi's family's behalf. "Then I'll go upstairs first," Liang Shuyu said goodbye. Wei Youqi pushed him along. Go on, go on." Then he tried to slip away with him, but Aunt Xiaoping noticed and shouted him back with a single sentence. Wei Yoqi flashed Liang Shuyu a bitter smile and went back helplessly. After Fatty Wei finished helping them carry the things, he went downstairs. Liang Wenjing was completely carefree. Seeing Liang Shuyu drenched, she actually burst out laughing. Drink the medicine first. Then hurry and take a hot shower. The water might get cut off in a bit. Liang Ying shot Liang Wenjing a glare, then gently said to Liang Shuyu. Liang Wenjing wasn't afraid of Liang Ying's glare at all. When Liang Ying turned her head away, she even made a face at Liang Shuyu. Liang Shuyu hadn't been in the mood to joke around to begin with, but seeing how unrepentant Liang Wenjing was, he could only be nasty for once. With a 2-month power outage, your novel's doomed again, right? And your attendance bonus is gone too. TSK, how tragic. Liang Wenjing. Liang Shuyu. Will you die if you don't say anything? She was just a flop writer barely surviving on the attendance bonus. Was that easy for her? QEQ. After coming out of the shower, Liang Shuyu noticed 2 canisters of gas placed by the door. He hadn't been very focused when he came back earlier and hadn't noticed them. His mother had probably ordered them while he was out buying medicine. This was great. 2 gas canisters should be enough for their family to use for a month. There was also still a big canister currently in use at home. If they were frugal, this gas would be enough to last them 2 months. At least next they wouldn't have to worry about cooking over a fire. The people living in high-rise buildings were the miserable ones. They all used centrally supplied natural gas, and after the power went out, who knew whether the natural gas would also be cut off? If even the natural gas was cut off, then those people would have trouble even cooking rice. Luckily, in their semi-suburban area, natural gas still hadn't been connected, so every household here used bottled gas. He just hadn't expected that something really would happen, and Lu Xiaopeng's worries had come true. Too bad there was no phone signal now. Otherwise, he really would have wanted to press Lu Xiaopeng for his supplies checklist. 22:53. It was almost 11. After dinner, the sky outside was still bright, and the aurora had become even more dreamlike. Liang Shuyu couldn't help but admire it carefully too. Such a magnificent visual feast would be too much of a pity not to appreciate. During Europe's massive blackout last year, he had heard that the aurora was only observed from a very high mountain. Yet this year, in a coastal city, such a grand aurora spectacle could actually be seen during the solar storm. It was truly strange. But he wasn't a professional, and he didn't seem to remember ever hearing that auroras could only appear at high altitudes, so for now he could only stare helplessly. Now that it was confirmed to be a solar storm, Liang Shuyu actually wasn't too worried. After all, there was precedent from Europe last year, and the blackout had covered a huge area as well. The European authorities had reacted too slowly at the time, but it had still taken only a month and a half to restore most of the power. Ever since last year's solar storm in Europe, countries all over the world had begun paying close attention to this issue. As far as he knew, this year every major city had carried out blackout drills of varying scales. At a time like this, he had enough confidence in his own country. In recent years, solar activity had become increasingly frequent. Even someone like him, who never paid attention to related fields, knew a little about it, let alone professionals in the field. So he believed that after Europe's massive blackout incident, the country he lived in would definitely be able to solve this problem even faster. Maybe the country had even prepared for it long ago. So by his conservative estimate, the economic losses caused by this solar storm blackout would not exceed last year's European blackout, and in terms of duration, it also couldn't exceed a month and a half. Most likely, most of the power would be restored within a month. But to be safe, he still estimated on the basis of 2 months. His family's gas was enough for 2 months. As for medicine, that went without saying. And food, together with what they had just bought on the way back, was more than enough for 2 months. He didn't know how many days the typhoon would blow for, but for a long while to come, he probably wouldn't need to go out. With that, Liang Shuyu finally felt completely at ease. Old Liang. It was Wei Yoqi's voice. The sky was too bright, and Liang Shuyu's phone had already broken and wouldn't power on. Liang Wenjing's could still be turned on, but that wasn't Liang Shuyu's after all, so right now he had no idea what time it was. Anyway, it was probably the middle of the night. Liang Shuyu opened the door, and Wei Yoqi, wearing pajamas, immediately slipped into Liang Shuyu's bedroom. Striking an overly coquettish pose, he lay down in the spot Liang Shuyu had just been sleeping in. "I can't sleep." Liang Shuyu looked down at him from above and said expressionlessly, "Don't act slutty on my bed. You joyless dog of a man," Wei Yoqi said coquettishly. Liang Shuyu inwardly rolled his eyes at the sight. Why had he become good friends with Wei Yoqi in the first place? In private, this guy was so flirtatious, it didn't match his style at all. Wrapped in his blanket, Wei Yoqi lay there sighing. What now? Liang Shuyu snatched back his innocent little blanket in disgust. No phone, no computer, no internet, no games. Wei Yoqi looked full of resentment. He had originally thought having a holiday would be great, but now he realized it was pure torture. Besides, judging from the current situation, these tormenting little days would very likely continue for quite a long time. Although Liang Shuyu thought the same, he put on an indifferent expression. Good, just right for adjusting our schedule. How long do you think the power outage will last? Wei Yoqi said. A month, maybe. Wei Yoqi was heartbroken. That long? Oh heavens. What are you afraid of? Once the typhoon passes, we can hang out at an internet cafe. There's nothing a generator can't solve. If there is, then 2 generators. It'll probably be packed, right? That's assuming those computers can still run. Electronics and finance are taking huge losses. Yoqi, come help, quick. Suddenly, Fatty Wei shouted from downstairs. The gale howled. Rain poured like a waterfall, and in just a few hours it had turned this downward-sloping street into a flowing river. Standing in it, you could clearly feel the force of the current. No, the wind is just too strong. It was Aunt Xiaoping speaking. Even though she was standing inside the rolling shutter door, her voice was still blown to pieces by the raging wind. At this moment, Fatty Wei, Wei Yoqi, and Liang Shuyu each had a rope of medium thickness tied around them. They were doing this because earlier, someone had tried to walk home along this road in the gale when a rotten piece of wood suddenly struck him and knocked him down. Although the man was fairly large, he was still blown off the road by the fierce wind. Luckily, he managed to grab a utility pole in the field ditch behind him, and it took nearly 20 minutes of calling for help on that pole before Fatty Wei noticed him. The wind outside was simply too strong. If possible, Fatty Wei wouldn't have wanted to take such a huge risk with 2 kids in tow either. But the phones were completely unusable now. 120 and 110 were nothing but decorations. Just hold on to the rope and hold it tight. Fatty Wei was fair and plump, and Liang Shuyu had always seen him as a warm-hearted and generous person. But sometimes he was a little too warm-hearted. Like right now. The wind was just too strong, and the rain was heavy too. Even with a raincoat on, it made almost no difference compared to not wearing one. This typhoon had come with such ferocity, and under the auroras glow the city was sprouting a cold green light. Although quite a few people were excitedly admiring this rare spectacle from their windows. In Liang Shuyu's eyes, the city seemed to have turned into a morgue. The buildings were grave mounds, rising and falling, glowing with a sinister light. Inside every grave mound lay countless fresh corpses. This bizarre thought had existed ever since Liang Shuyu began admiring the aurora. So when Fatty Wei suddenly told him to tie on a rope and help save someone, he had been unwilling. He only reluctantly agreed because he didn't want Fatty Wei, who had always rather liked him, to think he was cold-blooded. Fatty Wei had already gone around the front entrance of the convenience store and was moving with difficulty along the wall toward the back of the store. The gale and torrential rain roared against their faces, making it impossible to open their eyes at all. Fatty Wei had 2 ropes tied to him, one connected to Liang Shuyu and the other to Wei Yoqi. When they reached the back of the convenience store, they could clearly see the man in white clinging tightly to the utility pole amid the bombardment of wind and rain. The 2 of them each tied one end of the ropes to the anti-theft iron bars on the window behind the convenience store. The ropes were connected to their waists and also to Fatty Wei. Only then did Fatty Wei try taking his first step away from the wall and into the wind and rain. Yet after only 2 or 3 steps, he was immediately knocked over by the gale, falling awkwardly into the abandoned field. The typhoon blew his raincoat upright. His round bulk became something of a shield in this situation, though just barely. But at least he managed to get his bearings again while crawling on his hands and knees. Hold the rope steady, Fatty Wei shouted, his voice fragmented. Holding it steady. Wei Yoqi sounded a little excited. After all, saving someone was a major righteous deed. And maybe it would even make the news. He had already thought of what he'd say. Just a small favor. At that time, he would definitely say it calmly like that. Having learned his lesson, Fatty Wei no longer tried to stand. He crawled through the filthy, weed-covered wasteland, inching closer to that person step by step. The man looked over with gratitude and reminded them to be careful. The sky looked as if it had been dyed with streamers, or as if death were ostentatiously waving fantastically colored ribbons while observing this eerie city. Brilliant light shone over the land, and even the rain became colorful. No one could ignore the visual shock brought by these gorgeous auroral bands, and no one could ignore the typhoon's ferocity either. The torrential rain smacked loudly against the ground, and it was raining even harder now. Liang Shuyu tightened his grip on the rope in his hands. Other than being difficult, nothing unusual happened in the rescue process. And Fatty Wei successfully got close to the man on the utility pole. He untied from his waist the rope that had been connected to Liang Shuyu and tied it to the man instead. Thank you, thank you. The man's eyes brimmed with tears. He was so grateful that they had braved such heavy wind and rain to save him. Fatty Wei, however, was as casual as ever. In weather like this, be careful going out, man. Couldn't help it. The car wouldn't start, so I had to walk back in the rain. The car's still abandoned on the main road. It was okay when I was passing through the residential area, but around this semi-suburban area, there were hardly any tall buildings left. So the wind became incredibly strong, especially since this wasteland faced directly into a completely unobstructed wind corridor, and a few hundred meters farther down was a sewage river. If he hadn't clung desperately to the utility pole, he very likely would have been blown into the sewage river. Just thinking about that possibility made the man shudder with lingering fear. It's not tied tight enough. The rope is slipping. Tie another knot. Fatty Wei reminded him. So the man freed both hands to tie the knot. Originally, with Fatty Wei holding the utility pole and supporting him, it would have been fine, but suddenly a hard object blown by the wind struck Fatty Wei hard in the back, causing him to lose his grip. Blasted by the violent typhoon, both he and Fatty Wei were blown rolling out into the field. With this fierce yank on the ropes, Liang Shuyu and Wei Youqi, who were connected to them, were both pulled away from the edge of the wall and fell to the ground. Fortunately, one end of the rope was tied to the security bars, so aside from the agonizing pain where the ropes bit into their waists, they were otherwise unharmed. Liang Shuyu had long been on guard against something like this, so he reacted quickly. He quickly dropped to his hands and knees and searched for Fatty Wei and the man with his eyes. Under the aurora, the night was as bright as day, and he could clearly see Fatty Wei digging one hand into the soil, desperately steadying himself so he wouldn't be blown away. As for the other person, because he had taken the full force of the wind head-on, he had rolled even farther than Fatty Wei and fallen below the field ridge. Other than feeling the rope pulled taut, they could no longer see him. Wei Youqi saw this too. He hurriedly crawled over to pull Liang Shuyu's rope, but Liang Shuyu slapped his hand away. What are you doing? Wei Youqi shouted. Pull your dad first. That person fell down there. Your dad's over there clawing at the dirt. He's safe. Liang Shuyu said nothing. The wind was too strong, and even if he spoke, it wouldn't be clear. Half kneeling, he pulled hard on Wei Youqi's rope. Wei Youqi had no choice but to work with him to pull his dad back first. He could see that Liang Shuyu's rope was still taut, and only then did it occur to him that below the field ridge should be a safe place, at least out of the wind. Once the three of them were safe, they began working together to pull the man as well. Perhaps because the field ridge was a bit high, and under the battering of the gale, the man had become extremely heavy. With such a long rope and such strong wind, under the principle of leverage, he was as heavy as a truck. Finally, they managed to pull the man up from below the field ridge. Only then did they discover that he had wrapped the rope around his arm with his bare hands. It turned out the rope had long since loosened. If he hadn't been hanging on desperately, he would already have been blown away. The looks in Wei Youqi's and Fatty Wei's eyes revealed how dangerous it had been. The three of them had nearly used up all their strength, yet the wind seemed almost to be opposing them. The man was blown upright by the wind, and then a violent gust swept over. With only a sharp bang, Liang Shuyu suddenly flew out like a kite with its string cut. If Fatty Wei and Wei Youqi hadn't both grabbed him, he would probably have met the same fate as that man. By the time Liang Shuyu and the others came back to their senses, there was no one left at the other end of the rope. Soon after, they saw the figure on a utility pole 200 meters away, more precisely, a corpse. It was tangled in the wires, like a strange piece of white cloth fluttering in the wind. Everything happened too fast. No one knew what time it was. Aunt Xiaoping brought the hot water she had prepared to Liang Shuyu, and Liang Shuyu only took one sip. The room was so silent it was unsettling. Liang Shuyu put down the cup and patted Wei Youqi on the shoulder. Wei Youqi looked up at him, his eyes red-rimmed. We did our best, Liang Shuyu said. Wei Youqi knew that. He was just upset. Wei Fatty didn't look too good either, especially since not only had they failed to save that man, he had been blown by the wind onto a utility pole, his corpse exposed in the street. Compared with not saving someone, trying to save them and failing was even more painful. Liang Wenjing and Liang Ying came downstairs. Liang Ying had already seen everything that happened from upstairs and worried that it would have a psychological impact on Liang Shuyu, so she hurried over and hugged him. Too much had happened today, and she was very worried. Liang Shuyu patted her back to show he was fine. After returning home, Liang Wenjing used iodine to dab the scrapes on Liang Shuyu's body. Liang Shuyu was staring blankly at the stopwatch face. Looks like we'll have to live without time now. Liang Wenjing broke the silence and said, I'm thinking maybe we need to make a handmade calendar, otherwise we'll forget what month and day it is. Liang Shuyu came back to himself, tossed the watch aside, and said with a smile, You're not scared? There's a person hanging outside the window. Liang Wenjing's hand pressed a little harder. Don't scare me. The composure she had barely managed to hold together was completely ruined by that one sentence from Liang Shuyu, and tears had already welled up in her lowered eyes. It's really terrifying. You have no idea how worried Mom was about you just now. If anything happened to you, how are we two women supposed to go on living? After all, our family only has this one man. Liang Shuyu thought to himself that he didn't want to do this kind of thing either. He'd only been forced into it. But if there were a next time? No. How could something like this happen a second time? Did he think his life was too long? At the time, the wind directly snapped the iron bar his rope was tied to, and he was flung out. If Wei Fatty and Wei Yochi hadn't been holding on to him, he would have been the second person hanging from the utility pole. His life was too precious to risk for an unrelated person. Did you hear me? Liang Wenjing reproached him. So perfunctory. Liang Wenjing got so angry that she threw down the cotton swab and quit, leaving Liang Shuyu helpless. He could only deal with the remaining scrapes himself, but since he didn't have eyes on his back, he had to leave the places he couldn't reach alone. Liang Wenjing was scared at night, so she slept with Liang Ying. Liang Shuyu couldn't sleep, so he went to the living room to smoke. Outside the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room, he could clearly see the corpse swaying in the wind and rain, bathed in the aurora and covered in a ghostly green glow, as if it were unwillingly staring in Liang Shuyu's direction. Liang Shuyu sensed a trace of cruelty wandering through this city. Or rather, the cruelty of nature. It had taken a life without hesitation, yet it was ignorant and unfeeling, and bore no responsibility. You scared me to death. Getting up in the middle of the night, Liang Wenjing was startled to see Liang Shuyu sitting on the sofa admiring the view. What are you doing? Enjoying the view. Go enjoy the view somewhere else. There's a dead person out there. Do we have any other suitable place in this house to enjoy the view? Other than this big floor-to-ceiling window in the living room. It seemed they didn't. Liang Wenjing muttered, Then you also? And then she noticed something else. You're smoking again. No way. He had already thrown the cigarette away. September 27th, 2032, heavy rain. Day 5 of the power outage. The heavy rain had gone on for several days in a row. The aurora disappeared at noon on the second day of the blackout. As soon as it disappeared, it felt as if it had taken the sun with it too, and for many days afterward, there wasn't the slightest bit of light to be seen. The dark, torrential rain compressed the city between black heaven and earth like a gigantic graveyard. But most people were actually in a good mood and had not fallen into panic because of the continuous rain and power outage. What happened with last year's massive blackout in Europe was common knowledge. Almost everyone knew about it. And with that precedent, people already had some concept of solar storms in mind. They only feared the unknown. When it came to known things, they took them in stride. Of course, even though a society without electricity had no internet, no video games, no TV dramas or variety shows, at least people didn't have to go to work, didn't have to squeeze onto the subway or bus, and didn't have to get scolded by their bosses. If your employer was decent, maybe after this blackout there would even be wage subsidies. It was basically like paid leave. Even if your employer was average, the state would introduce relevant measures. At the very least, social insurance fees would be cut in half for several months. So most people were in a good mood, while the ones who weren't were all at the bottom of society, the kind who lived hand to mouth. In this city with a permanent population as high as 13 million, there were many middle class and above, but even more hovering around the poverty line. Liang Shuyu, after all, did not belong to that group, so he could not truly understand the hardships of the poor. He only knew that during last year's massive blackout in Europe, most of the people who died were poor. People online had even jokingly called it a cleansing of society's trash. The weak would be eliminated first, and only the strong could survive. But those who survived shouldn't get too smug either. That was something the self-proclaimed future person Zika from 2085 had said. So after this solar storm, Zika was probably going to become popular again for a while. But there was one thing that concerned Liang Shuyu a little. If Zika's sixth prophecy was referring to the European solar storm, then its content was, this year is the true beginning of hell. Many people will freeze to death in a short time, but that is nothing, because this is only the beginning. However, the seventh prophecy was, This year you will step into the real hell. Look forward to it. It's no big deal. The weak will be eliminated first, and only the strong can survive, but those who survive shouldn't get too smug either. If the seventh prophecy really refers to this Asian solar storm, then judging from its content, this is the real hell. Does that mean the disaster area this time is even larger than last time? The title of AIK's prophecy post was I Come From Hell. Was it saying that this year is the beginning of the real hell? Liang Shuyu suddenly slapped his forehead. Zika was just a publicity stunt by someone taking shortcuts. Although emotionally, he really wanted to believe that Zika truly was a person from the future. Rationally, he knew that was absolutely impossible. He should believe in science, believe in society, believe in things that were solid and tangible, things he could actually see and touch, rather than making wild guesses based on internet rumors whose origins were muddled. He could make a certain degree of psychological preparation for the prophecies put forward by Zika, but he couldn't worship them like some Chiuni patient. If conditions allowed, he could appropriately prepare more survival supplies. But he should reserve judgment about this kind of future prophecy. At present, most shops outside still had things for sale. There was just no electricity. The bigger the supermarket, the more chaotic the prices were. The more they were charged almost by feel. Most large malls were still open. In this situation, even those without generators, or those whose checkout computers were damaged, were required to stay open.